Good morning. So there's a lot to read today, so I'm going to jump right in. We're going to finish chapter 8 today. And it starts with this interesting interaction that Luke records when Jesus is teaching the masses, and his influence is so great now that even his own mom and his brothers, like, it's hard to get to him. Think about that. So they're saying, hey, your family's outside. And Jesus has an interesting response. He goes, those who do the will of my Father, they are my mother and sister and brother. Obviously, Jesus is not disrespecting Mary or his brothers, but what was Jesus alluding to when he says that? Right? What is he saying to us? Then we have this, this picture of, after this long day of teaching, he draws his guys out on a boat and he says, let's go to the other side of the lake. And of course, now this major storm kind of kicks up. Now, it's important to remember, it's one thing if I'm on a boat and it gets rocky. I'm not a boater. I'm not a fisherman. So if I got scared, it's like, okay, what do I know? It would make sense. But this is Peter and some of these other guys. Some of his disciples were fishermen. When fishermen are afraid of a storm, I want you to understand the significance. That's a storm, okay? And it's in the midst of this intense storm that has the disciples so afraid that they wake Jesus up, and Jesus is sleeping. What is the significance of Jesus sleeping through a storm that's terrifying the fishermen and the disciples? What storms in my life or in your life have occurred, and you're wondering, is God sleeping? Right? Think of the symbolism here. Hey, God, wake up. Don't you know we're about to die? Why aren't you afraid of this thing? Why aren't you paying attention to this? Has that thought ever entered your mind as you relate to God? Okay. And then how does Jesus respond to being, quote, woken up and being informed of what's happening? What does he do? And then what's interesting is he kind of asks them, like, where's your faith? Like, what are you worried about? And when he calms the storm, the disciples are terrified. That's interesting. What's the context of that? And without getting too much into it, know that in the first century, like, ancient thinking was the sea was a sense of God's judgment, right? If there were massive storms and rains that wiped out a crop, that was perceived as God's judgment, right? So Jesus calming the sea and the storm on the lake is a direct confrontation that he is God, because that's what God controls, the waters and nature, and they know that. And on the one hand, you're like, well, haven't they seen so much already? Why would this surprise them? But there's this picture of them being able to see Jesus, and then there's periods where they can't see Jesus. It's like the veils, their eyes are veiled, and then their eyes are opened. And then in the next moment, their eyes are veiled again, and then their eyes are opened. And this is a little bit of alluding to even the comments that I made from Ralph and Cindy. Thank you again for sharing. And then Ralph made some really good comments about how within our own human effort, we can be better hearers, right? You can be an active listener, right? You can pay attention. You can lean in. You can go to a quiet place and contemplate. And you should do that. Those things are within human control. We can be better hearers just by applying certain human skills, right? But there's a spiritual dimension to this that is outside of human effort. It actually comes from God himself, where the Holy Spirit, where God steps in and he intervenes and he helps you see things you could not otherwise see. And he puts sensitivities in your heart that would never otherwise be opened up. He takes a heart of stone and he makes it a heart of flesh. These are things, these are symbols proclaim through the Bible that it is God who initiates. It is God coming to the rescue, and he opens our eyes. And this is why, this is the deeper meaning to Jesus saying, he who has ears to hear, let him hear. Or when Jesus has said in other areas, my sheep hear my voice, right? Or when Jesus says, all that the Father have given to me will come, none will be lost. There's this more intimate picture. We are called adopted sons and daughters, okay? So it's like, I don't know, if there's a child who gets adopted, how much of that is the child's effort in getting adopted, and how much of that is the adult's decision to reach out and lay claim to that child and love that child, right? So you see this beautiful picture throughout the Bible that God is a seeking God who's coming after us in a way, in a beautiful way. And part, as you read this narrative, when you don't get mad at the disciples, because we're the same way. Our hearts are in tune, our spirits are in tune to the Holy Spirit at points in our lives where we hear God's voice and it's crystal clear, and maybe it's like God's talking right to me. And then it could be so shortly after that we can't see God at all. So this is part of the mystery of the Spirit of God dealing with us, and it's beautiful. Anyway, I'm going to press forward. You then have the Jairus story, right? His daughter dies. And in the middle of this narrative of him hearing Jairus' cry and then going to Jairus' house, God puts this little story in about this woman who'd been bleeding for years, and how, again, the crowds are pressing up against him so much. And he says this crazy, outlandish thing like, who touched me? And the disciples are like, who touched you? I don't know, like maybe 1,000 people? What kind of question is this? What is that about? And what's beautiful about this is, here's the takeaway. It's not just, God doesn't just want to heal us. He doesn't want us just to come with our problems. And you think, well, the real message of the story is that it was the woman's faith that healed her. And there is truth to that. The woman's faith played a vital element to the point where she didn't even need to make the request directly to Jesus. She just took the initiative, reached out and touched him. But I think the more beautiful picture is Jesus stops the crowds. He says, who touched me? What is he doing? He's making a scene on purpose. And she's like, am I in trouble? Like part of it, uh-oh, what did I do? What did I do? Who touched me? Jesus wants to draw the woman out. He wants her to lay claim of her new identity. Jesus wants her to raise her hand and say, it was me, and you've healed me, and now I'm yours, and it's beautiful. Anyway, so much more can be said about all of these things. Go to Jairus' house. God does the second healing of raising a person from the dead. Now it's the second time. And think of the dynamic with that. Jesus declaring, oh, she's only sleeping, she's not dead. And it says that people were like mocking that kind of a response. Like, what are you kidding me? We know what a dead person looks like, okay? And this is what's interesting. Jesus goes in, he says, anyone who doesn't believe, get rid of him. And he only brings the inner circle of the people that really believe in the power of Jesus. They're invited to come into this very small inner circle. And obviously Jairus was among them. And I want you to pay attention to the end of the chapter. What does Jesus say? He says, child, get up. Child, get up. And she goes from death back to life. Now that's mind-blowing. Dead things stay dead, right? So only God can do that. What's as mind-blowing, maybe more mind-blowing, is that is recorded for more than you to marvel at a physical miracle of being brought from physical death back to physical life. There's a spiritual story behind that. Child, get up. That's what the Holy Spirit does to your heart and to my heart. So as you're going through this Gospel of Luke and you're being impacted by this person, Jesus of Nazareth, if you are hearing a voice inside you where Heavenly Dad is saying, Phil, wake up, get up. That's what's really going on here. It's beautiful. It's powerful. Because God is in the life transformation business. So lean in. Have a great day today. And I hope you can get through all of the texts. All right. Love you guys.